What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
I love it. I love that open. What Tom said. Subscribe, like, welcome in, everybody. Rob Ellis Show on this game week. Oh, my God. Finally on A2D Radio. Yes, we have an actual real game to talk about. We're not trying to dissect some preseason game where you saw a starter for like 3 seconds and they were in there and they were out of there. No, this is finally freaking real here where we get to talk about a real matchup between the Eagles and the Patriots here on game week. I am so excited. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to actually there being a game. What's up, Michael? Hey, man, let's go. Let's all do a shot. All right. Let's drink up. We deserve it. We've been through that long. I mean, think about the last time the Eagles played a meaningful game was February, right? February. And we're finally here, man. We are finally here. And they have a game this week, and it's exciting. And it's New England, and it's always good to stick it to the Patriots. It's always good to stick it to Bill Belichick. And how sweet would it be? Before we get into the matchup, let's think about this for a minute. How awesome would it be, number one, to go up there on Sunday? What's up, Andy? Good to see you, my man. How awesome would it be to go up there on Tom Brady Day, right? When he's being honored, and you beat him. Do you know how crazy that would drive both him and Belichick again? Brady to this day, despite all the Super Bowls that he won, despite everything he accomplished, despite being thought of as the GOAT, despite at one point being married to the biggest supermodel that's ever walked the face of the earth, that Eagles Super Bowl loss still haunts him. To this day, it still haunts him. Think about that for a minute and think about how sweet it would be when he's getting honored and they're kissing his rear end and they're doing all the stuff they're doing for the Eagles to swoop in there and win that game. I just, man, that would be awesome. And it is an interesting thing to think about. And I agree with you, Rob. It would be very awesome if Belichick. Just think about this for a minute. What's up, Jake? My man Jake checking in. Jake, I agree. I am going to get to some point spreads later, guys. And I hate to say it. If I were betting this game, which I will not be betting this game, I will stay away from this game. But if I were to make a pick on this game, I'm just going to give you a little preview. It probably won't thrill Eagles fans. I'm just saying. We'll get into it later. Okay, point spread's kind of moved around a little bit. It was 5, then it was 3.5. As we sit here right now, it's 4. And that thing could very easily, what's up, Frank? That thing very easily. I love my crew, man. Frank and Jake and Rob and Andy and Michael. We got the whole crew here. Checking in. My guy Ralph taking care of business behind the scenes. Tom taking care of the big show of everything that's going on. Keeping a very close eye on this line because it is fluctuating. It is very interesting what's happening right there. So here is our A2D question. I want to fire this bad boy at you right out of the chute. Are the Eagles the best team in the NFC? Do you agree or disagree? By the way, again, like Tom said off the top of the show, let's subscribe. Let's hit the like button. All right. Here's where I'm at. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I agree with the A2D question. Here's why. You have the best quarterback in the NFC. You have, as of we sit here right now, what's up, Ryan? As we sit here, what's up, Greg? As we sit here right now, you have a team that is fully healthy, that brought back a lot of big-time players. Even though there was turnover and change on this team, the unknowns, if you will, I think are that good that they are going to step up and perform at a high level. Who are the unknowns? Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis to an extent, Nolan Smith, Reed Blankenship, Jacoby Dean, Sidney Brown. These are our unknowns right now, right? And I'm not telling you across the board that I have faith in every single one of them, but I do have faith in those guys. And you couple them with the returnees, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, all double-digit sack guys. Fletcher Cox, 7 sacks. We know what he brings to the table, even though he can frustrate people at times. That's just on the defensive side, not to mention your corners, Bradbury, Slay, Avonte Maddox. You're bringing back that entire crew. You throw a veteran in there with the Kobe Dean in Zach Cunningham, who's got size and experience. Then you go to the other side of the ball. Other than, and I'll get to the running backs in a second, but other than losing Isaac Seumalo, who was a solid player, no doubt, but you're replacing him with Cam Jurgens, who's been coached up now by Jeff Stoutland, by Jason Kelsey, by Lane Johnson, by Landon Dickerson, by Jordan Mailata. Would you want anybody else coaching up a young offensive lineman but that crew? I wouldn't. Then you go to the running backs. Diversity is the key here. It's the D word. You have DeAndre Swift. Catch the ball in the backfield. Home run hitter, space guy. Rashad Penny, power. You need 2 yards, he's going to get you 3. We know what Gainwell and Scott are capable of doing, and they can jump in there and more than hold their own. If those 2 guys, the aforementioned Swift and Penny, who have had an injury history, if for some reason they go down, and we know that, that's a possibility. You have good depth there, and you have a diversified backfield. That's to go along with the runner-up MVP. He lost the MVP to Patrick Mahomes, to Jalen Hurts. Think about that. Would have won the MVP of the Super Bowl had he not had that fumble. Then you go to the receivers. Both guys, 1,000-yard receivers. And I'll get to the captains that were named today, too. You have a tight end who, if he stays healthy, could get you 1,000 yards. So this team's loaded. And we try to sometimes outthink ourselves a little bit. It's only human nature. It's human nature and Philadelphia nature. What's up, SMD Eagles? Let's go. Come on. So you have all of those things going for you. That's why I think they're the best team in the NFC. The 49ers can't stake that claim when it comes to their quarterback. They just can't. Brock Purdy did a nice job managing things last year. But if it comes down to it and you have one drive to win a game, who do you want as your quarterback? Do you want Jalen Hurts? Do you want Brock Purdy? I'll ask you the same question about Dallas. You have one drive in the playoff setting or a Super Bowl setting to win a game. Do you want Dak Prescott or do you want Jalen Hurts? It's Jalen Hurts all day. Not to mention Nick Sirianni, who gets very little love. Very little love here. I'll take him over Kyle Shanahan. What's up, Charles? Over Kyle Shanahan and Mike McCarthy all day. Charles agrees with the poll. Is it not interesting? What's up, Brian? Yes, the season is upon us. Amen, my friend. Amen. It's interesting to me how little we talk about Nick Sirianni. This is a guy who 2 years ago, go back 3 years. The last year under Doug, the Eagles win 4 games. They look like a total train wreck, right? And then this guy gets brought in who nobody ever really heard of. And he steps in. Oh, all right, Ryan, let me dig it on what Ryan had to say here. Rob, the Eagles last year had nearly an identical run-pass ratio for the season. However, they always seemed to pass it nonstop in the first half unless it was Hurts running. They never ran the running backs in the first half of games. Do you see them evening out the running with the passing all 4 quarters? I want to see them get away from only. Well, Ryan, here, I'll answer that. So the theory, and this goes back, this is the philosophy of the Eagles. This goes back to Joe Banner and Andy Reid. So it goes back a long ways. But their the way that they look at this philosophically is you get a lead from passing the ball. You build your lead that way, then you run to milk the clock and keep the other team's quarterback off the field. That's the way they view it. So Charles, or Ryan, to answer your question, I don't know that they necessarily get away from that. I think that's what they want to do. They would prefer to do that. I don't know that every game's going to dictate they're able to do that. The Eagles were so dynamic passing last year. And let's face it, they played some teams that just couldn't handle their passing game. Therefore, they took leads by passing it. Then they ran the ball, to maintain the lead. I think this year could be a little bit more back and forth with games. And I think this year they could be trailing. So it may look a little bit different in how they approach things. But I think ideally they'd like to do it the way they did it last year, Ryan. Back to what I was talking about here. We don't talk about Sirianni that much. And it's strange to me because he takes over, inherits a team that was kind of a mess in Doug's last year. They still had the Wentz stink on them. First year quarterback as a starter, second year in the league, but first year as a full-time starter. And gets them to the playoffs that year. Pretty impressive. Yeah, you could, Charles, argue that the Eagles are the most complete team in the whole league, not just the NFC. I would agree with that. And I'll get to what's happening with Kansas City in a second here. But the following year, excuse me, he gets them to a Super Bowl and is within 3 points of winning a Super Bowl. And yet we talk about, if you think about all the players that I just laid out, we talk about Howie Roseman. We talk about the new coordinators. We talk about Jeff Stoutland, who's an offensive line coach. A lot of times before we even talk about Nick Sirianni, it's pretty crazy when you think about that for a minute here. But so for all those reasons is why I agree to the A2D question of the day. I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC. And I don't disagree with what Charles said. I mean, if you think about it, look, until Kansas City is knocked off, I always view it this way. Until you're knocked off, you're the champ. Okay. And SMD says Sirianni literally beat every coach of the year candidate last year, and he beat the winner 3 times in one season. So I think of it from this standpoint. When you look at this thing overall, to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. That's pretty obvious. But what I mean by that is Kansas City, to me, even if I look at this team this year from KC and think they don't have as much talent, I still have to put them, as the team. But if you look at it a little bit closer, what's happening with Kansas City? Chris Jones holding out, and I think he's in it for the long haul. Like, I don't think he's going to cave and play Thursday night on the same contract. I don't. I think he's really dug in. There are reports that he wants a 3-year, $28 million per year extension. And I know defensive tackles are getting paid now. That is a boatload of money, man. $28 million a year for a non-quarterback. So that's the $1 million question. We got Coach Marcus checking in as well. Pro Fan Talk. What's up, Rob? Agree with the poll. The Birds are the best team in the NFC. So thank you, Coach Marcus. So again, looking at Kansas City for a second, there's the Chris Jones effect. And if you didn't hear, Travis Kelce in practice on Tuesday hyperextended his knee. Are they going to turn that thing around and play on Thursday? Are you really going to take that risk with him there? Now, I don't know if the Kelce thing is long-term, but I'm not messing with the Kelce thing. And especially on a Thursday night with that quick a turnaround. Like, I got to be really careful with him, which could make that game interesting because I think the Lions are going to score points. KC's going to have to put up some points to knock them off. I'm really interested how that game's going to play out. Speaking of injuries, so let's dive a little bit into the game itself with New England. So Riley Reif, their right tackle, is out. He's on the IR. We know that. Their 2 starting guards are both banged up as well. Now, you're talking about Mac Jones, who isn't the most mobile guy in the world. Not a statue by any stretch, but not the most mobile guy in the world. The Eagles should be able to eat in this game. If Reif is out and you're either missing one or both, or your guards are compromised a little bit from an injury standpoint, the Eagles should be able to get home and not only sack and hit Mac Jones, but force him into turnovers, whether that's a forced fumble, whether that's a quick throw he doesn't want to necessarily make that gets intercepted. I mean, that is where this game should be won. If you're asking me, give me one key to this game, I will tell you it is 100% the Eagles' defensive line against this Patriots offensive line. That's where the game can and should be won by the Eagles. Now, it's not to say I don't think the Eagles' offense can do some things. They can. But New England's defense is very good. Go back and look at some of the numbers last year, and they didn't lose a whole lot. Matthew Judon's the real deal. Josh Uche's the real deal. These are guys who were double-digit sack guys. The Eagles' O-line, if you remember back to last year in that Detroit game, the O-line did not look like itself. And I was a little worried. I'm saying to myself, I looked at this as perhaps the biggest strength of this team, the offensive line. And Detroit had a lot of free runs at Jalen, and Jalen was running for his life in that game, if you remember. So I do wonder if maybe the limited preseason or the no preseason at all that we see from Jalen and Kelce and Lane Johnson and Mailata and Dickerson, et cetera, if there isn't a little bit of an effect early in the season, in particular that first game of the year with the offensive line, because we know how good they are, and generally they settle in. So my point being, I think New England could create some pressure. The difference is Jalen can get out of there and make a play. Jalen can buy himself some more time to throw the ball down the field and make a play. This is also where I'd be very curious to see if the Eagles incorporate the screen game, which hasn't been a big part of what they've done under Nick Sirianni. But when you have somebody like Swift, when you have somebody like a Gainwell, who is a really good pass catcher out of the backfield, I would hope at least you're incorporating some more passes to the backs, not just check downs or dump downs, which is fine too, by the way, if there's nothing there and to avoid the sack. It's okay. But I do wonder if they're going to incorporate that a little bit. But I look for Reddick. I look for Sweat, who I think is going to lead them in sacks this year. I look for Jalen Carter to have a big impact in this game, Fletcher Cox. And New England's a good offensive running team. They are. Stevenson, and they have now Ezekiel Elliott. This is a game where I want to see something out of Jordan Davis. I want to see Jordan Davis stuff the running game. You know, I'm done with the kid gloves with Jordan Davis. I'm not knocking him at all for the way last year went. I'm not. Because first of all, he was in a situation where he wasn't playing a ton. He had a high ankle. He had a concussion. There were some things that happened last year that are understandable. And I think he was still figuring out his conditioning and, you know, where he felt like he needed to be and all those kind of things. And look, it's hard as a rookie just in general to get your bearings, right? And to understand this stuff. So I'm good there, but I want to see it now. Now I want to see it. You know, show me why you traded up to get this guy. Show me why, you know, we were told, oh my God, this guy's measurables, size, speed, the whole nine. I want to see it. You know what I also want to see from him? I want to see him play with some edge. Like, I think Jalen Carter has an edge that he plays the game with. I want to see Jordan Davis get a little angry. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about dumb penalties or anything like that. I'm talking play angry, play with your hair on fire. So Jordan Davis needs to step up. So I think a couple of those things are going to be the key. Now, I want to go back to this notion of Brady and what kind of impact it has on the game, an emotional toll, if you will. So I think it can work a couple different ways. If the Eagles come right out in this game, and now the fans are going to be obviously up for this no matter what, it's the season opener, but they're especially going to be up for it because it's Tom Brady. But if you come out and smack them in the mouth right away, you go right down the field and score, or you take the ball away on New England's first offensive possession, and that happens, is there really going to be a Tom Brady effect when that crowd's quiet? I don't think so. That could be another thing to watch. You know, you always want to jump out on teams early, but you especially want to do it in this case. That to me is going to be something else to watch, how things go early. The last thing you want to do is let this Patriot team hang around a little bit. You don't want that. My sense is in the game, and I mentioned the point spreads, it went from 5 to 3.5 to 4. So it's kind of moved, and it may move before kickoff on Sunday. Very likely will, one way or the other, half point, whatever. If I was betting it, I'd probably grab New England with the points. It feels like a field goal kind of game. It feels like Detroit last year for me. Belichick with this much time to game plan is a little worrisome. You know, what we don't know is the real unknown for me in this game is how much of an impact Bill O'Brien is going to have on Mac Jones and this offense of the Patriots, which wasn't good last year. If he has a big impact on this thing, then I'm concerned. Then all of a sudden, you know, you're seeing New England kind of hang around in this thing, and they're able to move the ball, and maybe they're attacking Slay. I don't know. We'll see. I don't love their weapons necessarily. I really don't. Ryan, I hope you're right. The Eagles and the Bills in a Super Bowl. By the way, that was Peter King's pick. Eagles-Bills Super Bowl, for what it's worth, from MMQB and NBC Sports. But if New England's hanging around here late in this thing, not a great sign, obviously, for the Eagles, because then there's going to be the emotion of the crowd. The ceremony is going to be at halftime for Brady, and that could spill over, you know, into the third quarter. So that's something to definitely keep your eye on here. So I think the Eagles win, but I think it's an escape sort of one of those deals. I do. But the Brady thing flips two different ways. One, if you bite them early, then I don't think it matters at all. You let them hang around, then it matters. The other thing I don't know that we're talking about enough. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too far into my own head here too. How about the Matt Patricia effect? Matt Patricia, who was with the Patriots for a very long time as a coach. Of course, he had the little stint where it was a disaster in Detroit, but, defensive side of the ball, defensive coordinator. He was coordinator in the Super Bowl when the Eagles beat them. Leaves, comes back in that weird role last year with Joe Judge, where he's kind of an offensive coordinator, and that didn't work, to say the least. But he's an Eagles coach now. How much of the debriefing that they're going to put him through will come into play? Look, Belichick is a smart guy, and he's going to change up some of the calls, some of the other things where it's not blatantly obvious. Like, he's not going to do what the Raiders did in the Super Bowl years ago against the Bucs when Gruden knew every play and every call. Okay. He's not going to do that. But the fundamental principles, how they like to do things, he can give you a lot of insight from both sides here, the defensive side and the offensive side. How big is that key? Like, I wasn't in love with the Patricia hiring. My thought on it the whole time was, seemed kind of weird. I think he's a safety net and someone to bounce things off of, if you will, for Sean Desai. Somebody with the experience as a coordinator and a head coach. So I kind of get it from that sense, but because there was some bad blood with he and Slay, I didn't really love it. Now, it seems like those two are okay. Saw them the other day in practice, high-fiving and all that stuff. So I guess they're all right. But if there's ever a game that Patricia comes into play, I mean, it's this one, right? This is a game where you can get a lot of information out of them. So just keep the Patricia thing in mind, when you're looking at this thing. So I like the Eagles. And what's up, Nina? Patriots wideouts don't scare anyone. If we can stop the run game, we will be big. We will start out slow, a bit rusty, but get it together late. I can't argue that. And I agree with you. They don't necessarily have great weapons. I mean, I like their tight ends better than I like their wideouts with Hunter Henry and Gesicki. But they can run the ball. And I think what they're going to do is the Washington game plan from last year when the Commanders beat the Eagles at the Link. If you remember that game, basically Washington said, we're not going to let you guys get on the field. We're going to own the time of possession. We're going to pound the ball down your throat, time-consuming drives, keep Jalen Hurts and that high-powered offense standing over there. Now, they also created a couple of turnovers, which, became huge in the game, if you remember. And that's ultimately, I think, why Washington won. The Eagles, I think, would have, pulled it off, the win. But I think that's what all teams are going to try to do to the Eagles here. And look, as much as we all dislike Belichick, and rightfully so, you do have to acknowledge what kind of coach he is. And he is a guy, when he has extended time to study you, tends to make the right choices from how you go about things defensively. That's what worries me about this game. That's why I say this game is going to be very, very close. I know a lot of Eagles fans think they're just going to go in there and roll them. I don't. I think it's going to be closer than people think. And again, I wouldn't bet it because I would never bet against the Eagles. But if you're asking me if I had to pick a side, yeah, I would side with New England. I'd grab the points. And especially if it gets up to 4.5, if it gets back up to 5, somewhere in that range, I would be all over it. But if you look at the way that the schedule sets up, and I'll just go a little broader here with this, and I want to get into the depth chart in a second, because I think there were some interesting things when the Eagles released it on Tuesday. So New England game is not going to be an easy one for sure. And then how bizarre is it that we've been waiting since February for a game, and then we get 2 games dropped on our lap or in our lap within a 4-day span? I mean, it's tough, right? It's going to be a challenge for sure. I think the good news is having 2 games that close in proximity is that it's this early in the season. You're not going to be as beat up as you would if this was a week 9 or week 10 game. So that's a good thing if you're the Eagles. But it's also going to be a game where you're still trying to get your conditioning down. I don't care how much work you do in camp. game conditions are different. So, it's one thing just to get through Sunday's game where you're going to be pretty beat, man, because you haven't done this in a long time. And then all of a sudden you got to turn it around that quickly. That's the big challenge, conditioning wise, for the Eagles. That's why you would love for the Birds to get up big in this thing and just have some guys standing on the sideline in the fourth quarter. But I don't foresee that happening. Hope I'm wrong. But anyway, you get Minnesota the next week. And they did a really good job on Justin Jefferson last year. Can you do it? Do you have the blueprint? Is that the way you look at it? Do you say to yourself, man, shut him down last time, going to shut him down this time? Or do you say, shut him down last time? I don't know. You hold this guy 2 straight games. I tend to, maybe this is the Philadelphian coming out in me. I don't tend to think that you're going to be able to hold him down for 2 straight games, personally. It's not to say I don't think the Eagles win the game, because I do think they win the game. I feel better about the Vikings game, believe it or not, than I do the Patriots game. I think the Eagles win, but I think Jefferson will get his. It'll be one of those deals, and that's fine if that's the trade-off. So, look, I think close, sweat, early, win week 2, you're 2-0, then it's at Tampa. I think Tampa's bad. I don't think they're Arizona Cardinal bad, but I think they're bad. And I don't think Todd Bowles is a good head coach, and I think Baker Mayfield will make enough mistakes, and that's a Monday night game down there, that I think the Eagles will win that game as well. I feel pretty good there. Then they come home for Washington. Washington is a tough team to handicap right now because you just don't know what Sam Howell is going to bring to the table. You just don't. I mean, right now, they have all their eggs in that basket. There's talent on that team. They have talented receivers. They have talented running backs. They have a really talented defensive line up front, in particular their tackles. But can Sam Howell be better than what they've had? Wentz, Taylor Heineke. I think he can be better than that. I don't know that he's someone who you can have the kind of faith that he's going to make a real deep playoff run. But I think he'll be solid for them. Nonetheless, that game's at home. The Eagles remember what happened at home last year against them. I like the Eagles there. Then week 5, they go out to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. Now, the thing with that game is, I don't think the Rams are going to be very good, period, but especially if Cooper Kupp's not right. If you haven't heard, he's been dealing with a hamstring coming off the injury last year, but he's dealing with a hamstring now, and he's actually seeing a specialist for it. Now, that could be a couple different things. It's smart to get a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, especially when you're a professional athlete, really for anybody, but especially a professional athlete. Or it could be, we're really troubled by this thing. We got to see somebody who's extraordinary in the field, not just our team doctors. To be determined. Either way, I like the Eagles. This is where it starts for me to get a little tricky. Going to the Jets. Now, real quick, if you haven't been paying attention to the Jets, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've had Aaron Rodgers just hammered down your throat. But it hasn't. He's been sort of humble, Aaron. What's been interesting is all the yapping that's been going on with them. So DJ Reed, one of their defensive players, he said that the Jets defense can be historical. And he compared them to the 86 Bears and the Legion of Boom. Okay, this is where I need one of these. Like, I need this. I need this. I need a full. Give me a break, dude. Play a game before you start comparing yourself to the 85 Bears and the Legion of Boom. Okay? So the Jets are doing a lot of yapping and a lot of talking. Now, I think they're going to be good. I do. But they're in a really difficult division, number one. Other than New England, who I think is just going to be okay, the other 3 teams are more than capable of making the playoffs. And if Tua stays healthy, certainly can make the playoffs. And for him to be talking the way he's it's not wise. This is where Robert Saleh or Joe Douglas has to say to him, dude, right here, quiet. No more talking. Anyway, I don't love that game for the Eagles. I think that could be a loss in New York. Then you come back to Miami. Again, a little bit tough to know. Is Tua still playing at that point? Sunday night game. It's here. I don't know. If he's playing, I am concerned with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting loose on Slay and Bradbury. I'm concerned there a little bit. That could be another tough one. Ultimately, I think the Eagles win, but that could be a tough one. Go to Washington. That's a coin toss kind of game. Here's the thing. I think the Eagles are going to split with the Cowboys, and they will lose at least one more division game. I don't see them sweeping Washington, and I don't see them sweeping the Giants. So I think there's at least one more loss there, divisionally. So there's at least 2, maybe 3. What's up, Brian? Hope you're well, man. What's up? Nina, we appreciate you as well. So I like the Eagles to beat Washington earlier. This could be a loss, the next one. Then they're home for Dallas before the bye week. I think the Eagles win this one. I think they finally are able to somewhat contain Dak Prescott and get a win in a game against him. He's played very well against the Eagles. We know that. I mean, Dak's history is he doesn't come up big in the playoffs. But I think in this situation, he'll be perfectly. They'll do a good enough job against them. But he's been very good against them in the regular season. But I think that's a game the Eagles win. I think they lose at Dallas. I'll give you a little foreshadow. All right, then it's the bye week, and here we go. At Kansas City, Buffalo home, San Fran home, at Dallas, at Seattle, Giants home. That takes you up to week 16. There's 2 games after that, but let's hold off on them for a minute. Let's work our way through this. Kansas City, Monday night, off a bye. KC also off a bye. Andy very good off a bye historically. That much we know. Challenge of a game, right? But here's the thing. I look back to last year with this game, the Super Bowl. Eagles outplayed them in a big way in the first half. There was a critical turnover. Second half, there were not the adjustments made that needed to be made, and it's not all on Gannon. It's also on the players. But I think having gone through that last year and losing that game, not only the X's and O part of it, but also just the emotion of that. I'm telling you right now, I think the Eagles go into Kansas City and win that game. I feel good about that one. Then I think there's a letdown the next week against Buffalo. And now, I know that sounds weird. It's not like you're playing some bad team. But I just think the emotional pitch of having gone in there and won has a little bit of an effect, and the Eagles lose to Buffalo the next week. Then they bring in San Francisco. Has there been a team that has cried and whined and complained and bitched and moaned anywhere near this 49ers team? It's bordering on embarrassing. But their fan base is too pathetic to even see how embarrassing it is. Nonetheless, the Eagles have heard it. Trust me when I tell you that. The Eagles have heard it all offseason. And that bad boy was circled on the calendar from Jump Street. So my sense is San Fran comes in here. The Eagles take care of business. I think they will get to Purdy. I think they're going to force Purdy into some mistakes. Certainly, this is not an easy game by any stretch. This is an unbelievable defense. It's an offense that's got Christian McCaffrey, that's got Deebo Samuel, that's got George Kittle, that's got Brandon Ayuk, et cetera, et cetera. They're loaded. But I think the Eagles, at that point, from a defensive standpoint, now, early in the season, which I'll get to in a second, they're going to have some defensive issues, the Eagles are. But I think by that point, they'll be hitting their stride. Now, you may not be able to tell as much because they're going to be playing such a good stretch of teams, but I think the Eagles defense is going to be setting itself up for that playoff run. So I think they win that game. Unfortunately, I think they lose the next week to the Cowboys. That's a Sunday night game at Dallas. That's a tough one. It's a really tough one. The Seattle game there the following week is very much a toss-up kind of game. The Eagles have traditionally not played well there. That's a very tough place to play for anybody. They have not played well in that game. But I think if the Eagles lose to the Cowboys, they win that one. Come home for the Giants, win. Home for Arizona on New Year's Eve, win. By the way, the first Giants game is Christmas Day, 4:30. You got the Sixers and the Eagles that day. Good luck if you have to jump around from family member to family member that Christmas, I don't envy you. Now I'll be working, so it won't matter for me. But that's going to be it's going to be one of those days you want to just plant yourself in front of the couch. Sure the wife and family will love that. But anyway, and then they close it out. They will beat Arizona. That Giants game will depend. It's almost impossible to handicap that game. Will the game mean anything for the Eagles? Will it mean anything for home field advantage? Will the game mean anything for the Giants to get into the postseason? Eagles may not be playing anybody. Giants may not be playing anybody. Neither team may be playing anybody, or they both could be playing everybody. So you just don't know what that game's going to look like. So long story short, I've told you this before. I think the Eagles are a team that wins 11 or 12 games. I think they're right in that range. I'll go 12 for the sake of our discussion. Now you're going to say, oh my God, that's 2 games less than last year. That doesn't matter to me. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. The schedule's tougher. There have been some circumstances that have changed with this team. And that's going to lead me into one of the reasons why I have the Eagles where I have them. Look, you've had a lot of turnover here defensively. You have Sean Desai taking over as the defensive coordinator. You have a new linebacker coach, secondary coach. You have Javon Hargrave departing, CJ GJ departing. Other keys on this team, TJ Edwards, Epps, Kaiser White, these guys are all gone. And they're mostly replaced with younger guys. Not in all cases. Cunningham is a veteran, but mostly young guys who are unproven, which doesn't mean they can't play. As I said earlier, I believe these guys can play, but it may take a little while. I mean, this is the NFL, and not everybody hits the ground running. So I think it's going to take a minute for the Eagles in this season, defensively to get going. I think the offense will, in fact, hit the ground running. I think the offense is going to be awesome. I think they're going to score more points per game than they did last year. But I think it's going to take the defense a little while to catch up. I think by the end of the year, we're going to be saying to ourselves, you know what? Kobe Dean can play. Jalen Carter can play. Nolan Smith can play. I'm a little worried, speaking of. Anybody else worried about Nolan Smith's shoulder? He hurt himself in that Cleveland game, which was the second preseason game. And then he was out, I think, for 5 practices. So that's tough. That is real tough. Travis Kelce, by the way, Ralph updating me. Travis Kelce is listed as questionable for Thursday, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. Yeah, hyperextended the knee. I'd be real careful. Chris D, my girl, checking in. She's great. I love Chris D. A huge Eagles fan, huge Philadelphia sports fan. She's awesome. So I would be a little bit worried about the defense getting acclimated early, but I think ultimately the cream rises to the top in terms of talent. And I think there's enough talent there with the young guys mixed in with the older guys that I think they'll be okay. But again, you're going to have a little bit of patience. They're not going to be as effective this year defensively, at least early, as they were last year. I still think they're a team that's going to get a lot of sacks, which sacks do a lot of different things. They create turnovers. They create great field position for your offense if a team's pinned all the way back and they're punting out of their own end zone. So for sure, all those things are important. Let me dig in here on the depth chart here, which came out on Tuesday. Now, keep in mind, okay, the depth chart is not the end-all be-all. Teams put these out for a number of different reasons, and one of them is because the league makes them put them out. All right? But it doesn't mean what is necessarily listed is gospel, as they say, okay? It's not a done deal. But there are some interesting things here. All right, let me throw them at you. No surprises here. Jalen Hurts, Marcus Mariota, Tanner McKee. We all knew that's what that was. As much as that frustrates some Eagles fans that Mariota's the backup, he is the backup. Okay, running back. This is where it's a little bit interesting. They list Gainwell, then Penny, Gainwell, Rashad Penny, Scott, and DeAndre Swift. Now, I don't know that they look at this as a numerical thing, going 14 for Gainwell, 23 for Penny, 35 for Scott. But the thing is, DeAndre Swift wears 0. Wouldn't he be first? I don't know. Is that like a math equation? Would he be last? I don't know. Anyway, that's how they have it listed. What I think the pecking order is: Swift, Penny, Gainwell, Scott. That's how I think it's going to play out, at least in the first game early on in terms of playing time. All right, your 3 starting receivers, and it basically is 3. A.J. Brown, no surprise. DeVonta Smith, no surprise. Quez Watkins, I don't love it, but no surprise. They only have 4 on the roster, so the guy after that is Olamide Zaccheaus. Starting offensive line, there's no surprises at all. Mailata, Dickerson, Kelsey, Juergens, Lane Johnson. Now, here's who's backing those guys up. Fred Johnson, who got the 2-year deal, is the backup at left tackle. Sua Opeta is the backup at left guard. Nobody listed at center because if Kelsey goes down, Juergens will slide in at center. Tyler Steen has versatility to play both the tackle and the guard spot, but he's listed behind Juergens as the right guard backup. Jack Driscoll is the right tackle backup. Your tight ends are Goddard, Stoll, Calcaterra, and then Albert O. How I think this plays out, if he knows the plays well enough, it's Goddard, Albert O. I don't know what I think Calcaterra is probably inactive week 1. So there's your offense. Go to your defense. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat. They're your ends. Your edge/Sam guys. Hassan Reddick. Then they have Patrick Johnson. Then they have Nolan Smith. So Patrick Johnson, at least on the depth chart, ahead of Nolan Smith. Fletcher Cox, your D tackle. Jordan Davis, your D tackle. Their backups. Fletcher's backup is Milton Williams. Jordan Davis's backup is Jalen Carter. We'll see about that. We will see about that. I think Jalen Carter is going to be a starter. But behind Milton Williams, Cantavius Street, Moro Ojomo, and then behind Carter is Marlon Tuipulotu. All right, let's go to your linebackers. Your Mike linebacker, your middle linebacker is Nakobe Dean. Nobody listed as his backup. Your Will is Zach Cunningham and then Christian Ellis. Your starting corners, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, and your nickel corner, Avonte Maddox. No surprises there. Behind Bradbury is Josh Jobe, Eli Ricks. Behind Slay, Keely Ringo. Behind Avonte Maddox, Mario Goodrich. Your starting safeties, at least the way they're listed right now, Reed Blankenship, backed up by Sidney Brown, with Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans. So it's Edmonds-Evans. That could very well flip, and by later in the year, it could be Sidney Brown. No one's listed as the punter. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that Sipos will be called up from the practice squad, or are they still working guys out and deciding? I tend to think that that's not great news for Sipos, that he's not listed. Just my opinion. Maybe it's wishful thinking. I don't know. Jake Elliott is your kicker. Your long snapper is Rick Lovato, as we know. Now, here is what's interesting, too. Your punt returner is Olamide Zaccheaus, followed by Quez Watkins. Keep in mind, this is the way it looked last year before the season, and then they broke glass in case of emergency, and Britton Covey came in there and returned punts. But Boston Scott listed as your kick returner. So the interesting things of note, no punter listed. Zaccheaus as your lead punt returner. Kind of interesting a little bit there. And just some of the way the depth chart is kind of laid out is interesting as well, in my estimation, at the way you look at this thing. So Chris D, I think the posted order of running backs is a mirage for publication. Sirianni will not play. He will play the hot hand, or the situation will dictate. I agree with Chris D on that. I do. I agree. Maybe they break out Carter in the Vikes game. Yeah, maybe. Look, I think you're going to see him a lot in the New England game. I do. What's up, Thomas? My man Tom checking in as well. What's up, Andrew? Yeah, Eagles be fighting for the division. Let's not forget they lost 7 starters. Yeah, I agree. And they will be fighting for the division because Dallas is good. Look, none of us want to admit that. None of us like that that's the case, but they are. Dallas is a good team. And for whatever reason, they certainly play well against the Eagles during the regular season. The big thing for Dallas is, as I've said before, Dallas has a lot of Sixers in them. Look good on paper, win a lot of games during the regular season, star players, but then when it's really crunch time, where are you? Where are you is the big question. So that is interesting. Now, the Eagles did name their starters, and they named 9. That's a healthy amount of or not starters, captains. And that's a good amount of guys. So, and none of these are surprises. Jalen Hurts, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Darius Slay, Jake Elliott, A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith. The last two, I don't think the Eagles want to give off an impression that either guy is above the other. Make sense? I don't think real Eagles fans pit A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith against each other. I really don't. I haven't heard any of that. But I don't think the Eagles either wanted to acknowledge and give one the love, not the other. Yeah, DeVonta a little young, he gets the love, but it's cool. I think it's all good, and it's smart, the way that they went with this thing. All right, so a couple games. I'll give you some games that really piqued my interest this week, and then I'll give you another game that I like here from a betting standpoint, okay? So, of course, I'm interested in Thursday night's game because we haven't seen a real football game in a very long time. But that's going to be the Lions and the Chiefs. And, of course, that game could really be impacted in whether or not Travis Kelce plays and whether or not, Chris Jones ends his holdout. But that line dipped a little bit. It's now down to Kansas City -5. Okay, certainly interest there. Here's some of the other just good games, okay? Bengals at the Browns. Browns are going to be better than people think. And that game is Cincinnati -2.5. That's going to be a really good game. Interesting game. Beyond that, I'm interested in the Titans and the Saints. I want to see what both of these teams look like. The Titans collapsed last year. And the Saints now with Derek Carr, they're 3-point favorites at home are the Saints. This is another really good one. How about the 49ers at the Steelers? Niners are 2.5-point favorites in this one. I like the Steelers. I like the Steelers in that game. Here's the other game that I like from a betting standpoint. I don't think it's a real appealing game, but I like it from a betting standpoint. Cardinals at the Commanders. Commanders are -7. The Commanders don't have any business laying 7 on anybody. However, Arizona stinks. They are a disaster area. I'll lay the 7 here, even with the unknown of Sam Howell. I will lay the 7 here with Washington. All right, other games I like, I'm interested in. Dolphins Chargers. That game's in LA. That's a 425 with the Eagles. Chargers -3 in that one. Cowboys Giants Sunday night. Cowboys -3.5. I would grab the Giants and the points there, especially if you get the hook. 3 and a hook, I'd grab it. That could be a field goal game. Like the Giants a little bit in that one. And then you go to the Monday night game. Bills Jets. Bills are -2.5 at the Jets. Interesting game on a lot of fronts, right? The Aaron Rodgers thing, all the hype. What's up, Pete? Appreciate you. All the hype, all the talking the Jets have been doing. And then we finally get to see them on the big stage there at their place. But think about what a key game this is. I'm a Giants fan, by the way, but I seriously think the Giants have a good shot at being a playoff. I do too. I think Giants have a shot at being a playoff contender. Absolutely. The question I have with the Giants is, do they have enough outside weapons? That's the first thing. I know they added Waller. I would say they have enough outside weapons, and is Daniel Jones ready to take it even to another level? Like last year, he went from gigantic question mark, will probably walk, to this guy can play a little bit. The thing I think the Giants really have going for them is I think they have an excellent coach, and I think they have a pretty good defense. So I think they will be in playoff contention for sure. But the second part of that Jets-Bills game is the Bills. The Bills have a lot to prove. The Bills have a quality team. I think they're well coached by Sean McDermott, and they've gotten close a bunch of times now. And they've lost in excruciating fashion, by the way. They need to get over the hump, do the Bills. This is a big year for them. Can Daniel Jones take over a game is what ProFan asks. I think that's one of the questions that needs to be answered. If you're asking me right now, probably not, in my estimation. And I think that's what will hold the Giants back. But they have enough other parts in a weaker NFC that I do think they can fight for playoff contention. I do. If you're asking me to run through the divisions, I think the NFC East is going to be really close. Because I think the Eagles are going to win less games than last year. Now, Dallas plays a very difficult schedule as well. I think it's going to be real close. I think both teams are going to be in that 11-12 range. I'm going to give the lean to the Eagles, but the Cowboys are going to be right there. I think the Giants are going to be a team that's fighting for a spot, as I mentioned, in that 10-win range. I think Washington is probably about an 8-win team. You go to the NFC, I like Green Bay more than some do. I know, you look at it, they lost Rodgers and they're going to be cooked. I don't think so. I think they're going to hang in there. Detroit is the favorite for most people, but it's a little different when you're wearing expectations like Detroit's wearing this year. I still think Detroit's a playoff team, and it's a tough call. I think there's most likely only one team coming out of the North. Actually, I'll amend that. I'm going to go Detroit and Green Bay. Then I'll jump over to the South. I think it's a one-team division. And I'm going to go with Atlanta. I'm going to surprise people a little bit with Atlanta. Most think it's New Orleans. I'm not a big believer in Dennis Allen. And I like what Atlanta did in the offseason. And they have a really interesting offense. If Desmond Ridder can play it all with Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Drake London and a decent offensive line, I'm keeping a close eye on Atlanta, by the way. Out west, look, it's San Francisco and Seattle. I don't think the Rams are a playoff team, and I don't think the Cardinals are a playoff team. I think Seattle's good. The big question with Seattle is Geno ready to be a guy who goes into that like big time stage in an NFC Championship game and win? I mean, that's a big question. I really do. I don't know that Geno is that guy. Chris says, darn, I think you're dead right about the fight for the NFC East. Dallas will give us a heart. They will. Dallas will provide you the same kind of heart attack that the Phillies bullpen provides everybody. It's going to be one of those deals. So I think it's going to be close, but that's who I like in the NFC there. Let me give you the AFC really quick. I'll run through them as well. And then I do want to touch on some Phillies before we get out of here. In the AFC East, I'm going to still go with Buffalo. Here's why. I can't fully trust that Tua stays healthy. Like the issue with the head injuries is a scary one to me, and it's not one that you just suck up and play through, and that worries me about him. I'm not a Dolphin fan, but I wish no ill will on somebody, especially in that capacity. So I worry about him, being able to keep it rolling. I think the Jets are a playoff team. I don't think New England is. I go to the North. I think this is an excellent division overall. Man, the Ravens, Bengals, Browns, and Steelers. Somebody's not going to make the playoffs that should out of there. I'll still go Cincy to win the division. Then I'll go Pittsburgh. Then I go Baltimore. Then I go Cleveland. Then I'll jump over to the South. This to me is the Jags division. I'm not a firm believer in Tennessee. I think what we saw last year when they kind of fell apart is more of who they are. I think Indianapolis and Houston are rebuilding. They're doing the right thing with the young quarterbacks, but it's going to take a minute for them. So it's not going to be this year. And then the West. Oof. All right. So it's Kansas City for sure. And then you start to look at everybody else. As much as we are all kind of down on the Chargers, there's still a lot of talent there. What I worry about with them is their head coach. I don't love Brandon Staley at all. I think Sean Payton will do enough to get the Broncos into the playoffs. I think the Chargers are the iffy team. And I think the Raiders are the team on the outside looking in. I just think, whether it's Josh McDaniels or whatever the case may be, man, I am just not in love with that setup there. I'm just not. And I don't know that Jimmy G can stay healthy either. I really don't. I mean, he's a good game manager. We all know that, and is probably better than people give him credit for, but he does have a tough time staying healthy and actually finishing season. So I would worry about that a little bit. So that's what I'm looking at, Eagles. That's what I'm looking at, NFL. That's what I'm looking at for this game this week against the Patriots. Let me sneak in a little, Phils. Let's start with the good. I mean, the good is pretty obvious here. I mean, you're talking about a team from a win-loss total, okay, in the Phillies. It's 15 games over 500 right now. It's pretty darn good. They're 2.5 up as the first-place team in the NL wildcard. These are all positive. If you look at their record since June 2nd, they played very good baseball, very winning baseball. And the bats have really come alive. I mean, you look at what Trey Turner's done. And since that ovation, man, it is nothing short of remarkable. I mean, his numbers, last 30 games, 339 average, 42 hits, 12 home runs, 33 RBIs, and 28 runs scored. Awesome. Awesome. The long ball has been there for him. He's got the average up to like 260. It's incredible the turnaround. He's not the only one hitting. Schwarber's been very good of late. He's been excellent getting on base. He's been excellent, obviously, with the long ball. He's got 40 now, but he's also getting hits. I mean, he's on base 5 times on Monday night, doing what you want a leadoff hitter to do. He's been really good. You've gotten contributions all year. Like Stott had a bad game against the Brewers, bounces right back with 4 hits. Boom, clutch, RBI, run-driven machine. All those things are good. Harper's cold right now. I don't worry about Harper. Like, I think the bats are going to be there. Here's the concern. It's the pitching. Tell me one pitcher besides Wheeler that you trust. There isn't anybody right now. I mean, think about it. Even your starters. You can't trust Nola. It's a good start. It's a bad start. Ranger, we got to give him a little bit of time coming off the injured list. But he worries me. Jay jumps in here. Phillies can play with anyone, but their pitching has to pick it up, and I believe they will playoff time. Yeah, I mean, here's the good news, Jay. We got about a month here for the pitching to get its act together. I think Ranger will. I can't say it with any certainty about Nola, and Taijuan Walker is a very fortunate pitcher. The bats have picked him up every single time it feels like he went out there. He has not pitched particularly well, but they score a lot of runs for him. He needs to be better. You know, Ranger Sanchez has given you everything, or Christopher Sanchez has given you everything that he's had for a 5th starter. I really have no qualms with that guy whatsoever. But Michael Lorenzen, pitching Tuesday, is going to be a big one. He's going to be a key tonight. They need him bad. Hopefully, my hope would be, if I could ideally put together a rotation, it would be Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, Lorenzen. Now, the good thing is both Ranger and Lorenzen have experience pitching out of the bullpen. Lorenzen's done it a lot in his career, and Ranger did it very well early in his career, and he did it very well in the playoffs last year. So you can move those guys around. I don't know that you can do the same with Taijuan Walker. I don't know that you could. I agree. Chris D, they age you like dog years. The Phillies do. I'm telling you, man. Ajita. But it's not just the starters. Who do you trust to close out a game right now? Like, Rob Thompson doesn't have a lot of great options. Kimbrel's scary as heck. Alvarado's scary as heck. Sir Anthony, I don't know. He hasn't been the same guy all year. And not for 1 second do I trust Gregory Soto. So you got to hope that they're going through a dead arm period, that they get through this, and it resembles the bullpen that we saw that was so good the first half of the year. That bullpen was excellent for them. And those guys all out there deserve a lot of credit, but they need to be better. Like, you can't have Hoffman and Covey in these big spots in games. And Hoffman's done a really nice job for them. But, and so is Strahm for the most part. But they got to be better. They have got to be better. But if they don't, here's the thing. When you're facing Atlanta and LA and some of the other teams, you could Chicago potentially, that you could be going against in the playoffs, you're not going to escape these sweat jobs that you've been escaping, at the end of this, at the end of a lot of these games. Now, all in all good, and the offense will pick them up. And again, your big boys are hitting for the most part. Harper a little cooled off, but top of the order with Schwarber and Turner, and Castellanos has done a nice job. Real Muto's coming on offensively. All those guys have done a good job. And that's, if you're looking for your positive here, it's definitely that, I would say. And the good news is, after you get off this trip in San Diego, you do get back home. Now, you're going to get tested. You're going to get the Marlins and the Braves and all that. But the schedule closes out very favorably. You get 2 series with the Mets, and you get a series with the Pirates. So that's the way you close it out, which could allow you either, to really capitalize and win games, and or they may not matter, and you could set up your rotation, get your bullpen some rest, get guys like Real Muto who are, catching, they get beat up that way, get them some rest too. So that's the positive that you can take away from all those kind of things. So fun time of year, guys. I mean, you have the Eagles starting and a stretch run here for the Phillies, both of these two worlds colliding. That's a good thing. Trust me when I tell you that. We're in for, very similar to last year, a very fun September and October, and hopefully into November if you are a big-time sports fan. And I know each and every one of you guys are. All right, so let's continue to hit the like button. Let's continue to tell our friends to subscribe, if you could. it would be much appreciated. And we're going to keep cranking out just phenomenal content here on A2D Radio. And I'll be with you guys each and every week, kind of a mix and match where I'll give you all my opinions, or I do a little sit down with some of the people in the business that I really admire, but always fun hanging out with you guys. And I do appreciate my man, Ralph, doing all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. And of course, Tom and everybody here at A2D Radio. All right. I will talk to you guys next week after the Eagles-Patriots game, and I'll get you set for the Eagles and the Vikings game. So I'm looking forward to it here on the Rob Ellis Show on A2D Radio. Thanks for hanging with me.